Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. Today we're looking at the biography of Mary Shelley, and especially how it laid the foundation for her to create Frankenstein. I think the story is fairly well known. Victor Frankenstein, precocious young scientist, experiments to create a creature. He comes to be horrified by what he has done, so abandons his creation. The creature must now make his way in the world and educate himself. One of the tools he finds for this task is Milton's Paradise Lost. Soon we learn that Frankenstein will be haunted, even hunted by his creature until he completes a companion for him, an Eve to his Adam. The novel has been referred to as the first true work of science fiction, but it is also, in many ways, a book about loneliness, loss and guilt, which in turn asks the reader to consider questions of philosophy, ethics and society. Also, I just want to flag up that I was very fortunate to be sent this wonderful volume as a gift from SP Books. I'll leave them linked in my description box. It's a facsimile copy of Mary Shelley's original manuscript of Frankenstein. I think it's beautiful. I feel incredibly lucky to have been sent it, and I will be finding reason to show it off further in the video. But before we get into that, let's start at the beginning. Who was Mary Shelley, and what insight might her biography provide as we attempt to understand the writing of Frankenstein? Mary was the daughter of two accomplished people. They were the political and philosophical authors William Godwin and Mary Wollstonecraft. Her parents learned they were expecting her early in 1797 and married in the March. Little Mary was born on the 30th of August 1797. Just 11 days later, on the 10th of September 1797, her 38-year-old mother died from complications from birth and a postpartum infection. The family was an unconventional one for the time. William Godwin raised Mary with her elder half-sister Fanny, who had been born out of wedlock and was the product of her mother's relationship with Gilbert Imlay. William remarried in 1801. His new wife, Mary Jane, would also contribute a literary influence to the family and to little Mary's life, although the pair are said to have had a difficult relationship. Mary Jane was a translator, editor and bookseller. She also brought two children of her own to the marriage, Charles and Clara, known as Claire. Both children's paternities and the marital status of their parents are unclear. William and Mary Jane would have a son together, William Godwin Jr., in 1803. Unsurprisingly, intellectual pursuits were the order of the day in this blended family. As Betty T. Bennett explains, Mary attended a dame school, which is a private school for young children run by women. She also spent 7 months in 1811 at Miss Caroline Petman's school for the daughters of dissenters at Ramsgate. But it was her father who seems to have been her longest-standing and most engaged educator. As per Bennett, quote, "Under his tutelage, she achieved a solid foundation in history, ancient and modern, mythology, literature and the Bible. Visiting instructors provided art and French lessons. She also studied Latin, an uncommon subject for girls, and attended adult theatre and lectures with her father and family. Mary Godwin adopted her father's Deism, which she blended with a poetic Pantheism. She also adopted his daily discipline of spending each morning in writing and study, and throughout the course of her life she continued to study widely and in depth. She was fluent in Italian and French, acquired Latin and Greek, and some Spanish. In 1811, when Mary would have been around 14 years old, she was described by her father as being singularly bold, somewhat imperious, and active of mind. Her desire of knowledge is great, and her perseverance in everything she undertakes almost invincible. In so many ways, we can arguably already see the foundations being laid for the creation of Frankenstein here, in the variety of intellectual pursuits on offer, the climate of spiritual experimentation and questioning, which was complemented by a practice of regular writing. However, it is perhaps also possible to view the rumoured deficit of emotional nourishment, the thing that Mary's father lacked. He was an excellent teacher, apparently, but not particularly good when it came to meeting or talking about emotional needs. And perhaps this would be similarly vital to the kind of story that Mary would end up telling with Frankenstein, of a creature confused and damaged by the abandonment of its creator, desperate to find meaning and connection in its existence. Whatever the emotional deficits, Mary was seemingly proud of her parentage. In her introduction to the 1831 edition of Frankenstein, she wrote, "It is not singular that, as the daughter of two persons of distinguished literary celebrity, I should very early in life have thought of writing. As a child I scribbled, and my favourite pastime during the hours given me for recreation was to write stories." Nearly 2 decades before this introduction would be published, Mary would meet another key figure in her life. Percy Bysshe Shelley, poet and eldest son of Sir Timothy Shelley, Baronet, and his wife Elizabeth, had begun to correspond with Mary's father, William Godwin, early in 1812. It would not be long before William would become Shelley's father-in-law, but he started out as his mentor. Shelley had eloped with and married Harriet Westbrook in 1811, when Harriet was 16 and Shelley was 19. Harriet would be found dead in the Serpentine on the 10th of December 1816. She left behind a suicide note. So the pair were still married in 1814 when Shelley began his love affair with Mary, who would turn 17 later that year. The pair would meet frequently at the grave of Mary's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. On the 28th of July 1814, Mary and Percy eloped to the continent. They were accompanied by Mary's stepsister Claire, with whom Percy would apparently form an intimate friendship that distressed Mary. At this point, Europe, which they intended to tour, was a place ravaged by the Napoleonic Wars. The couple would struggle financially. Despite the privilege of Percy's birth, he had fallen out with his father a few years previously, who, in turn, had cut his son off financially. Percy had taken out loans to support himself, Harriet, their daughter, and the child he left her pregnant with, a boy, Charles, who would be born in November 1814. Mary and Percy had returned to England in September 1814, a couple of months before Charles's birth. Mary herself was pregnant when she returned, with a baby girl, who would be born on the 22nd of February 1815, and who would sadly die within a fortnight. Less than a year later, in January 1816, Mary would give birth to another child by Percy, a boy called William. 4 months after his birth, Percy, Mary, and William went to Geneva. Once again, they were joined by Mary's stepsister Claire, who, on this occasion, was hoping to further her relationship with another man, Lord Byron, by whom she was already pregnant. For this group, their summer by Lake Geneva would be overshadowed by the aftermath of the eruption of the Mount Tambora volcano in Indonesia from the previous year. This eruption is considered to be the deadliest in history. Around 100,000 people died immediately following the eruption, but then there would be around 3 years of weather anomalies and connected crop failures, famines, and uprisings. 1816 is often described as the year without a summer. This gloom is frequently connected to or offered as an inspiration for the decision of this group to compete with each other, to see who could write the best horror story on one stormy June evening. Mary reports that she was struck by writer's block at first, until apparently terrifying inspiration came to her in a dream. As she reports in the introduction to her 1831 edition of her novel. Night waned upon this talk, and even the witching hour had gone by before we retired to rest. When I placed my head on my pillow, I did not sleep, nor could I be said to think. My imagination, unbidden, possessed and guided me, gifting these successive images that arose in my mind with a vividness far beyond the usual bounds of reverie. I saw, with shut eyes but acute mental vision, I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantom of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavour to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. His success would terrify the artist. He would rush away from his odious handiwork, horror-stricken. He would hope that, left to itself, the slight spark of life which had received such imperfect animation would subside into dead matter, and he might sleep in the belief that the silence of the grave would quench forever the transient existence of the hideous corpse which he had looked upon as the cradle of life. He sleeps, but he is awakened. He opens his eyes. Behold, the horrid thing stands at his bedside, opening his curtains and looking on him with yellow, watery, but speculative eyes. This dream, or rather nightmare, would first be published anonymously as Frankenstein on the 1st of January 1818. Due to this anonymity, it was at first thought that the author was male. Percy Shelley himself was suggested. The original manuscripts, of which this edition is the facsimile, the one that was kindly gifted to me by SP Books, exists in 2 notebooks in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Through the manuscript, and indeed through this facsimile, we can see the editing process in action. We are shown words, lines and paragraphs crossed out, words exchanged and added, and marginal annotations and suggestions included. Percy and Mary worked together on the creation of this edited manuscript during the rest of their time in Geneva and following their return to England later that year. Percy is credited with correcting Mary's spelling and with suggesting changes to word choices. We see how Mary softens her monster, piece by piece. She humanises him. Mary and Percy seem to be almost in conversation with each other and with the novel in these notes. It is, however, difficult in some places to figure out which annotation was written by whom, as there is such a degree of similarity in Mary and Percy's handwriting styles. The novel would be ready during the spring of 1817. The editorial process was, however, shadowed by tragedy. As I mentioned previously, Percy's wife Harriet, who was at the time heavily pregnant, had drowned herself on the 9th of November 1816, with her body not being found until the 10th of December. This was, however, not the only tragedy. On the 9th of October 1816, Fanny, Mary's half-sister through her mother, had also taken her own life. Mary and Percy, who was now, of course, a widower, married on the 30th of December. They would have another child, Clara, on the 2nd of September 1817. The following March, 1818, the Shelleys, Mary's stepsister Claire, and Claire's daughter by Byron, who was also confusingly called Clara but known as Allegra, travelled to Italy. It was hoped that the warmer climate would improve Percy's health. Additionally, it offered an opportunity to place Clara Allegra in the custody of her father, which would, among other outcomes, dampen the rumours of the girl being Percy's child. There would be more loss. Little Clara Shelley died of dysentery on the 24th of September 1818. And on the 7th of June 1819, their other child, William, died of malaria. The Shelley marriage was strained by these tragedies and apparently also by Percy's wandering eye. They do soon seem to have found their way back to their affection for each other, however. When William had died, Mary was already pregnant with their fourth and only surviving child, Percy Florence Shelley, who was born in Florence on the 12th of November 1819. The Shelleys moved around Italy, making like-minded friends, researching and writing. Mary nearly lost her own life in June 1822 when she suffered a miscarriage that came with dangerous complications. The next month, on the 8th of July, she lost her husband Percy when he drowned in a boating accident. He was 29 years old. Mary, despite her profound grief, found purpose in her own writing, in preparing Percy's writing for publication, and in ensuring the best possible future for their son. As it would turn out, sometimes these ambitions would come into conflict with each other. Her father-in-law, who had not approved of the marriage and who would refuse to meet her, would offer support to her son on the condition that he was raised in England. To secure her son's future opportunities, she returned to England in 1823, and there chafed against the social expectations that so tried to inhibit her. Soon, her son's grandfather had more conditions. She must withdraw her edition of her late husband's poems, agree not to publish any of his other work, or bring the family name to public attention, or he would remove the allowance that was supporting her son. It wouldn't be easy, but she would, on occasion, find creative ways to get around his prohibitions in order to continue her own authorial pursuits and to further the literary legacy of the great love of her life. Mary would never remarry. Her father-in-law died in 1844. So Mary and Percy's son was in his mid-20s when he inherited his grandfather's estate and title. At last, the money worries were put to one side. Mary had more to celebrate when her son married Jane Gibson in 1848. Mary spent her remaining years travelling. She wrote, edited her late husband's work, and set about completing her biography of him. Unfortunately, Mary would not be able to see out all of her plans. Early in 1851, she slipped into a coma that is thought to have been caused by a brain tumour. She died on the 1st of February 1851, aged 53. Mary Shelley was certainly a prolific writer, but I think it's fair to say that Frankenstein is the work that she is most famous for. I wonder how much Mary's biography and the people and events within it can, or even should, be viewed as responsible for this, her most famous work. Before I close out, I want to quote from Germaine Greer's 2007 article in The Guardian, which is titled, "Yes, Frankenstein really was written by Mary Shelley. It's obvious because the book is so bad." Clearly, someone's a big fan. I hasten to add that I don't agree with this sentiment, but there is an interesting paragraph that Greer includes, in which she asserts that the author's femininity is writ large throughout the novel. She states, "The driving impulse of this incoherent tale is a nameless female dread. The dread of gestating a monster. Monsters are not simply grossly deformed fetuses. Every mass murderer, every serial killer, the most sadistic paedophile has a mother who cannot disown him. Percy was capable, perhaps, of imagining such a nightmare. But it is the novel's blindness to its underlying theme that provides the strongest evidence that the spinner of the tale is a woman. It is not until the end of the novel that the monster can describe himself as an abortion. If women's attraction to the Gothic genre is explained by the opportunity it offers for the embodiment of the amoral female subconscious, Frankenstein is the ultimate expression of the female Gothic." But what do you think? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comment section underneath this video. Or you can find me over on social media. I'll leave links to my Instagram and Twitter in my description box. Follow me there and we can continue this conversation. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, why not share it with some friends? Please also let me know by hitting the thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel, and if you think you're subscribed, maybe now is the time to have a little check. Make sure that YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you. While you're there, checking, subscribing, and perhaps resubscribing, why not hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.